There is a woman in the Bible who for centuries was called a sinner, a escort, a repentant, a woman whose name became synonymous with shame throughout much of the Western Christian tradition. There's just one problem with that story. It's not in the Gospels. What the Gospels actually say about Mary Magdalene is completely different, and in many ways, far more powerful. Let's start with the basics. The name. Mary Magdalene, in Hebrew Miriam of Magdala. That last part isn't a family name. It's a location. She was from Magdala, a commercial town on the western shore of the Sea of Galilee, known in those days for its salted fish trade, a relatively prosperous place by the standards of the region. That detail matters more than it might seem, because in the first century, women were rarely identified by their place of origin. They were identified through the men in their lives, their father, their husband, their son. Mary, mother of James. Joanna, wife of Chuza. Mary Magdalene isn't identified through any man. She's identified by herself, by where she came from. That strongly suggests she had her own identity, independent of a male household. Possibly her own financial resources. And in fact, the Gospel of Luke confirms this. In chapter 8, verses 1 through 3, Luke tells us that Jesus was traveling through towns and villages, proclaiming the good news, and the 12 disciples were with him, but so was a group of women. And Luke describes that group with unusual precision. Luke names 3 women, Mary Magdalene, Joanna, and Susanna. Then he adds, and many others who supported them out of their own means. That's a lot more than a footnote. These women weren't passive bystanders in Jesus' ministry. They were funding it, using their own resources, money, property, provisions, to keep the whole operation running. Without them, much of what Jesus did would simply not have been possible on a practical level. And Mary Magdalene is at the top of that list, not by accident. Luke also tells us something about Mary's past, that Jesus had driven out of her 7 demons. In the first century world, demons was a broad category. It could refer to what we might today call severe mental illness, epilepsy, serious psychiatric disorders, or deeply disturbing spiritual experiences. We don't know exactly what Mary went through, but we know it was serious, and that after she encountered Jesus, her life changed completely. She left everything to follow him. In the Gospels, that is the defining mark of the closest disciples. If you go through all 4 Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and track who was present at the most important moments near the end of Jesus' life, you'll find a very clear pattern. At the crucifixion, most of the 12 male apostles were in hiding, afraid of being arrested, afraid of dying. But the women were there. Matthew says, many women were watching from a distance. They had followed Jesus from Galilee to care for his needs. And he names Mary Magdalene first. Mark confirms it. Some women were watching from a distance. Again, Mary Magdalene leads the list. They didn't run, they stayed. And when Jesus is taken down from the cross and laid in the tomb, who's there watching where the body is placed? Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of Joseph. The men have already gone. And then we come to what is perhaps the most significant moment of all. On the morning after the Sabbath, very early, the women go to the tomb to anoint Jesus' body with spices. It was a gesture of love and respect, the last act of care you give to someone you've lost. They arrive and find the stone already moved. The tomb, empty. The Gospel of John tells this moment with an intimacy and detail that doesn't exist anywhere else in the New Testament. John says Mary Magdalene came to the tomb alone, while it was still dark. When she sees the stone removed, she runs to tell Peter and John. The 2 of them race to the tomb, take a look inside, and go home. The text says they still did not understand from Scripture that Jesus had to rise from the dead. But Mary stays. She stands there weeping. She looks into the tomb and sees 2 angels sitting where the body had been. They ask, "Woman, why are you crying?" She answers, "They have taken my Lord away, and I don't know where they have put him." Then she turns and sees a man standing nearby. She thinks he's the gardener. He asks the same question, "Woman, why are you crying? Who is it you are looking for?" And she says, "If you have carried him away, tell me where you have put him and I will get him." Think about what that line represents. An adult human body, her alone. She will get him. She's not asking for help. She's not waiting for someone else to sort it out. She's going to go get him herself. And then the man says one word, just one. "Mary." And she knows, Rabboni, which in Hebrew means my teacher. Mary Magdalene was the first person to see the risen Jesus. In all four Gospels, without exception, she is the one who receives that news first. And she is the one who goes and tells the disciples, "I have seen the Lord." That is why, throughout history, many theologians and early church fathers called her Apostola Apostolorum, the Apostle of the Apostles, the first to proclaim the resurrection. So how did this woman, close disciple, financial supporter, first witness of the resurrection, end up becoming a symbol of sin and repentance? The answer has a name, a date, and an address. In the year 591 AD, Pope Gregory I, known as Gregory the Great, delivered a sermon in Rome that would shape the perception of Mary Magdalene for over 1,000 years. In that sermon, Gregory merged three completely different women from the Gospels into a single figure, Mary Magdalene, the unnamed sinful woman who anoints Jesus' feet in Luke chapter 7, a woman the text never names, and Mary of Bethany, the sister of Martha and Lazarus. Three distinct women with three distinct stories collapsed into one. And Gregory went further. He identified the unnamed sinner in Luke chapter 7, whose sins are never specified in the text, as a prostitute, and he transferred that label onto Mary Magdalene. The problem is that none of that is in the text. In none of the four Gospels is Mary Magdalene called a sinner. In none of them does she appear as a prostitute. In none of them is she identified as the unnamed woman in Luke chapter 7. They are different people. But Gregory's sermon had an enormous reach. It echoed through art, theology, and popular culture for over 1,000 years. Paintings, sculptures, plays, devotional texts, all of them reproduced the same image. Mary Magdalene, the repentant sinner, with her hair loose and her eyes full of tears. It's a powerful image, but it's a fabricated one. In 1969, the Catholic Church officially revised its liturgical calendar and separated the three figures that Gregory had merged. It implicitly acknowledged that the identification had been a mistake. And in 2016, Pope Francis elevated the Feast of Mary Magdalene, celebrated on July 22nd, to the same level as the Feasts of the Apostles, a way of formally recognizing her central role in Christian history. But the distorted image still lingers in popular culture. And it's worth understanding why it was created in the first place, because it tells us something important about how the stories of powerful women tend to get handled across history. Here's the shift I want you to see. Throughout Jesus' ministry, one group gets all the attention, the 12 apostles. Peter, James, John, Thomas, Philip. They're front and center. They ask the questions. They get the private explanations. They're sent out on mission. And in the moment of crisis, when Jesus is arrested, put on trial, and led away to be crucified, they vanish. Peter denies him 3 times. The others scatter. Mark's gospel says they all deserted Jesus and fled. But the women stayed. Mary Magdalene stayed at the crucifixion. She stayed when the body was placed in the tomb. And she was the first to come back in the early hours of the following morning, when it was still dangerous, when soldiers were still around, when nobody yet knew what had happened. Think about what that means on a practical level. Anyone identified as a close follower of Jesus at that moment was at real risk of being arrested, maybe killed. The danger wasn't abstract. It was concrete. and she went anyway. Not because she was certain of what she'd find. The text makes it clear she went to anoint a body. She wasn't expecting a resurrection. She went because she loved him, because for her, that love was bigger than the fear. And that is exactly why she was the first to see. Not because of her status or her position, but because she was the only one who was there. John tells this moment with incredible tenderness. Jesus doesn't reveal himself with a speech or a miracle. He simply says her name, Mary, and everything changes. In the whole sweep of the Gospels, this is one of the most intimately human moments in the entire story. A name, spoken by someone you loved and thought you had lost forever. That's not theology, that's love. Mary Magdalene spent centuries being reduced to a symbol of shame. And when her real story is given back, the faithful disciple, the courageous woman, the first witness, something gets set right. But there's something in this story that goes beyond historical correction. There's something that speaks directly to what any of us has felt at some point. Because most of us know, at some moment in our lives, what it's like to stand in front of an empty tomb. Not literally, necessarily, but that feeling that something you loved is gone, that a hope has died, that you went back to the place where there used to be joy and found only absence. And what Mary does in that moment isn't extraordinary in terms of faith. She cries. She doesn't understand. She asks, "Where have they taken him?" She doesn't have answers. She has presence. She stayed when everyone else left. And it's in that staying, in that refusal to walk away before she understood, that she receives what no one else received. The question that Mary Magdalene's story leaves with us is this: in which moments of your life did you stay, when it would have been so much easier to leave? Sit with that. Mary Magdalene was not who they said she was. She was a disciple, a financial supporter, a witness, courageous in a way that very few people were. And for that reason alone, her story deserves to be told correctly. If this episode made you see something differently, about her, about the Gospels, about yourself, leave a comment and tell me what it was. If you want to keep walking this road, subscribe to the channel. Next time, we're going into the Sermon on the Mount, the longest and most revolutionary speech Jesus ever gave. A text that looks simple on the surface but, read carefully, changes everything. See you then.